I'd like to thank the Saskatchewan Library Association again for hosting One Book, One Province. Please take some time to listen to Paul as he goes through some of his readings from his book, Blanket Toss Under the Midnight Sun. I want you to sort of go back as well. Some of you that are young, you might be intrigued by this, to actually have somebody read a book to you. Some of us that are a little bit older, I want you to reflect back. I'm remembering being on the reserve, closing my eyes, listening to the radio, and the occasional evening, a story would be told over the radio. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. So I think by doing this as well, you'll now enter another part of my world, to be reintroduced to storytelling in a different form as well, by being orated to you. So please, if this entices you to pick up a book, or actually read the entire book, please, I'm hoping your yearning for learning and reading is intrigued by the Saskatchewan Library Association continuing to invest in literature and new literature that's starting to arise in the province. So thank you again, Jay Miigwech. Have a great day.
Hello, Tanze. My name is Paul Seesequaisis, and I am the author of the One Book, One Province 2021 selection, Blanket Toss Under Midnight Sun. Let me tell you a little about myself. My family's from Beardy's Okamasis, which is First Nation, about 45-minute drive north of Saskatoon. I've lived in Saskatchewan most of my life. On and off I've traveled, of course, but my family and my roots are here. My mum was one of the first registered nurses, Indigenous registered nurses in the province of Saskatchewan, and was always an inspiration for me. I've also worked as a writer, curator, archivist, self-taught archivist of Indigenous images and photographs. One Book, One Province aims to increase literacy and to create a reading culture by providing opportunities for residents to become more socially engaged in their community through a shared story. One Book, One Province encourages Saskatchewan's social, economic, and cultural development while supporting libraries and collaboration. In that spirit, I hope that you will enjoy this reading and be encouraged to visit your local library or independent bookstore to borrow or buy or read more. The Saskatchewan Library Association would like to thank Sask Lotteries, who provide funding to Sask Culture, and in turn, the Saskatchewan Library Association. We also owe a big thank you to the Saskatchewan Writers Guild, whose sponsorship helps to make One Book possible, and also for their assistance in promoting the project. The Saskatchewan Library Association's work and support reaches lands covered by Treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, and the traditional lands of the Cree, Dakota, Dene, Lakota, Nakota, and Saulteaux peoples, and homeland of the Métis. Part of Blanket Toss Under Midnight Sun was the gathering of many stories. Some of them are sad, some are about resistance and resilience, and some of them are also humorous. And stories, I think, that through the recording and working research into the book, which was about 2 years, I encountered a lot of stories that I think are unique to different regions or areas. And I want to share one which is from the Eastern James Bay region, Northern Cree lands, and it's about, I think, what was likely the first rock and roll tour by canoe. And this took place in 1973, so I'll start. There's a photograph, which I'm not sure you can see, but it's 4 young men standing there, one of them holding a stick. The man holding the stick is Oliver Rupert, and he was the founder and lead guitarist of the Fort George Rockers, a rock band formed in 1972 and still playing in 2021. They're still around. Rupert remembers photographer George LeGrady, quote-unquote, hanging around, but the band didn't pose for this photo. In 1974, roughly a year after the photo was taken, Rupert and his band embarked on what was probably the first ever rock tour by canoe, visiting 3 James Bay communities. Rupert recalled, "It was the summer of '74, the month of August. We had planned that summer to go on a tour with canoes, freight canoes, 24-footers. At that time, there were only 20 horsepower outboard motors available. We left Fort George early in the morning. Usually in August, it gets windy before the fall. So we left Fort George to go to the next community, Wimigi, at that time called Old Factory. That took us all day to get there. We had 3 canoes and we hired about 12 people to work with us. At that time, we didn't have that much equipment. It was just mostly amplifiers, guitars, drums. We made it to Wemigi that first day in the evening. As we were supposed to play that evening, one of the guys had to clean his guitar because it got wet on the journey. We set up our amplifiers while he cleaned his guitar, and by the time we finished setting up, it was getting close to showtime. He came with his guitar, was going to try it, and he still had his hip waders on. He plugged in his guitar, and luckily it worked, and he started playing. I think he was the only guy in rock history who ever played with hip waders on stage. As they left the next morning, the winds picked up and the water became too choppy for the 3 canoes. Quote, "We couldn't make it any further, so we had to sleep halfway to the next community, so we slept out in the bush. We put up a temporary little teepee. Some of us got some sleep, some didn't. We were sitting on the shoreline of the little bay when we saw a beluga whale swimming by. One of the guys wanted to shoot it, but we said not to shoot it. We had one woman who came with her boyfriend. She was pregnant, so we told him not to shoot the whale because it might wake and scare her. That morning, the winds calmed and they were able to travel to the next community, which was East Main, Quebec, where there was a wedding that evening, and one of the band members was the best man. After the wedding, they played to an appreciative crowd. We left that morning, but before we got to the bay, one of our motors broke down, a 20 horsepower. So one canoe was left in the community to see if we could borrow another motor. After 2 hours, they came back with a motor, which was 25 horsepower, and faster from the other ones we had. But once again, the winds and waves picked up, forcing the 3 canoes to again make for shore and safety. That night, the band and entourage camped out in the bush, but this time they were plagued by hundreds of mice, which they had to chase away. The next morning, the bay was calmer and the tour resumed in time for the Fort George Rockers to play their last gig in Wasaganish,